Welcome. This is part 2 of our study of music from Chapter 9 in our textbook Humanities Through the Arts, and I'm your instructor, Mrs. Duncan. We're picking up on page 231 with the subject matter of music and some real quick terms that you're probably already familiar with, but they identify the subject matter of music as being the sound and the feelings, and this is on 231. So what it sounds like and then how it makes us feel, right? So feelings, those sensations, emotions, passions, moods, and they subdivide those in definitions. Emotions are strong sensations felt as related to a specific stimulus. That means something prompted those feelings, those emotions, and of course passions are greatly intense emotions, and moods are a little bit different in that you get in a mood. It's a feeling, but you don't know where that came from. It may be just because you got on the wrong side of the bed, or just because. All right, there are a couple of theories, two major theories on how to deal with this, dichotomy of feelings, how important they are versus the sound. And so there is the theory that of formalists, and they just really kind of reduce the idea of the emotions. Okay, now music does evoke feelings, and it reveals structures of those feelings too. But formalists just say it's all about the sound, it's all about the form, and that's what's really valuable. So some music you hear, you don't find it evoking a lot of emotion in you, and that's one reason why you might not really care for it. And yet it's still considered a valuable form of art because a lot of it's more analytical in the sense that, or mechanical, even technical, put together in a pretty incredible way. And yet it doesn't mean it's devoid of emotion altogether. But just know that there are some that stress the sounds. And then more modern music is more expressionistic, that we're looking for that feeling to connect with the words, with the sounds. And so those are just two different theories, and you may prefer expressionism, but formalism has value too, and a lot of great works have been constructed that may or may not evoke any particular feelings in you. So our first study comes from page 237, and it goes into great length about Swing Low, Sweet Chariot, which should be a familiar spiritual hymn to you, and it has its origins in African American history, and we're going to hear a little bit about it. But it is a study in tone, and it talks a little bit about how it starts in key of A and has with the A note on swing, and then goes to F, the F note in low. And remember I mentioned in the other video that they name the notes with letters? Okay, and they only go from A to G, and then it starts over and they correspond. So they discuss that in detail. I just want us to kind of listen to it. You should be reading through your chapter, and we're going to listen to a snippet of it here.
Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Swing low,
By the famous Etta James.
sweet chariot, coming.
Changes up on the tempo, even though it uses goes from A to a C instead of A to F.
What did I see?
But still stays with F and A and C primarily.
Coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot.
Okay, so that gives you an idea of what that song sounds like, and how even it can sound really sad and be slow at the beginning and use some of the same notes and change completely there. All right, now that one has had a lot of emotion. These musical structures, we're going to study the different mechanical structures, the major ones. Okay, on the bottom of 237 talks about theme and variations, and it says the most familiar musical structures are based on repetition. repetition. So we like that in pop music too. We like when they repeat something that's familiar. Sometimes it's called a hook, and we can sing along. Makes it easy to catch on to it. Well, this one I talk about is a fugue example, art of the fugue, and it says they call each little theme and the variation by letter and a number. So A, and then variation 1, variation 2, variation 3, and so forth. So this is from Bach's Art of Fugue, and you'll hear what I'm talking about here. All right, this is the first one, all by its little self. Sounds like an oboe. Here comes the second one. Some type of trumpet. There's the third. Got a little richer sound. And now we get the fourth. These are different wind and brass instruments. Okay, it just keeps kind of layering. And so that's what we mean by theme and variations, and the way a rondo builds on those variations. Then some don't vary the same theme. They go back and forth, like they keep coming back around, and that's what's called a rondo, and that's on 238. This is the first section or refrain of a rondo will include a melody and perhaps a development of that melody, and then after a contrasting section with a different melody goes back and repeats that earlier part. So the B or the C is that new, sounding piece. The A, which they started with, they're going to always come back around. So they'll do the A stands for the way it started, then they're going to do something a little different, but then they're always going to come back and repeat A. All right, so let's take a listen to this little girl play this a rondo on the piano. It's pretty cool. They've gone back to the first. Now we got another new one. Oh, it's being all ghosty. Okay, so you get an idea there. That when they start, then they do a new one, then they go back to the first one. Okay, an actual fugue is mentioned on 238, and we mentioned that it's a specialized structure of counterpoint where the melody, the statement, and the answer play back and forth. So that one stays, with it. And we've already listened to one, so I won't play it again. Then another very well-known structure, and these were all pretty much developed in the 17th and 18th century. Music as an art really had its high point over in Central Europe in the 17th and 1800s. And some of our most famous musicians composed during this time. Some of them had heard of each other. They didn't all know each other. They lived in different countries. But we're talking about Bach, Beethoven, Mozart, just our top three right off the top here. Okay, so the sonata form which was used goes ABA. So it sounds like a rondo, but it's not ABAC, it's ABA, and kind of stays with that. All right, it says the letters represent not just melodies but main parts of the composition, and the example we're going to look at is Beethoven's Symphony Eroica. Now, we'll come back to that. Oh, and I didn't get Haydn's symphony on here as a clip. Fantasia, let's just go through because we don't have time to get every piece and example. Fantasia is not just a Disney movie. It came in the late 1800s, romantic composers, which kind of loosened up, less strict. Rhapsodies, nocturnes, and they're very very nice to listen to. And then you have the symphony, which was, as it says on 240, marks one of the highest developments in the history of Western instrumental music. So it's just we've been playing a lot of pieces that are symphonies. It depends on thematic developments throughout the movements, and you could look this one up if you want to hear it. Haydn's Symphony Number 104, done by the London Orchestra, or done in London there. Okay, our focus for our last bit of time is on this particular symphony, Eroica, by Beethoven, and this is featured. Let's see. Now, see, they have Haydn's Symphony featured in here too. So several pages, 241, 242, 243. But this is on the focus on Beethoven's Symphony in E flat major, number 3, Eroica, on page 245. And it goes over to, oh my goodness, to 249 really. So we're going to listen to a little piece that talks about how, kind of overviews it and introduces it. And then we'll listen to a snippet of it.
Well, our final piece of music tonight is the defining Third Symphony. Beethoven began composing it against a background of growing deafness, and after going through real despair, even contemplating suicide, he resolved that his art would be his salvation, and he threw himself into his work. What he produced outstripped anything he had previously written. Well, Julian, tell us exactly what it is about the Eroica that we're going to hear now that makes it so different.
The strange thing is, if you look on the stage, it won't look any different. The orchestra hasn't changed very much. There's an extra horn, there's 3 instead of 2. And then if you ignore the duration, which is quite a big thing to ignore because it's double the length of a classical symphony, it might look like an ordinary classical symphony in that it's got 4 movements, they're roughly in the same order. What's so different? Of course, it's what happens inside the music that really changes everything. I mean, the first movement, which makes so much of the drama of a kind of classical sonata form first movement. It produces these kind of brick walls of musical sound and builds up these dissonances, which nobody would have heard anything like in 1804, 1805.
Okay, so I wish we could listen to more of that, but we're going to try to listen here to the actual first part of
the Eroica.
Okay, so you get a little bit of flavor there of that and that sonata form and the opener, and it talks about that on page 245. And then last in our book and for discussion, this brings us up more to the modern era, and the main thing in that is blues and jazz, which developed here in the South in African American communities. It talks in the book about New Orleans being a real key to that. What it doesn't mention is that Alabama actually has a key figure in the blues. That's W.C. Handy. He was born up in Florence and wrote Memphis Blues, St. Louis Blues, a couple of others like that. But the main, center for where it was happening was in New Orleans, and then it moved up to Chicago with Louis Armstrong. It's talked about there. And it's just jazz is a particular style of the blues, and and it's the basis for rock and roll, blues is. Now, it's not that it's sad, it's just that, and they talk about this on the middle of 250, where they, instead of using the C major scale, it uses the sharps and flats. The blues, it's called the blues scale, and you see the little E flat and F sharp and the B flat, and it has just a completely different style. One artist that they mentioned a couple of times, Wynton Marsalis, at the bottom of 251 and with a picture on the top of 252. So how we're going to close out listening to him play. He's a trumpet player. A little bit of St. Louis Blues by W.C. Handy, just enough to kind of get that movement from sort of sounding sad to not really so much. You see, this is much happier, but it's still using the same blues scale. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed that. I think we might have one more video on things related to music, but that covers our chapter.